Thanks, Lee, and thank you for welcoming me and asking me to come here. Isn't it fantastic as well just to listen to the Chief Executive of Sport England in this audience, and I reckon there was 95 to 98% of narrative detail that actually wasn't about sport. And I take my time back to when maybe I was in these kind of audiences in the decades past and realised actually that was the very problem when we ended up with a huge focus on the things that actually weren't shifting the system and shifting some of those areas of what I've always called guilty knowledge, which Jenny's talked about very, very clearly. Now, we haven't choreographed this necessarily, but it's made my life very easy standing up, because I was hoping I'd have to find a way before lunch to agitate, aggravate, get stuck into you about the need for change, but I think Jenny's probably laid that out. What I thought I would do, and I hope it's of use, is do three things. First of all, and apologies for those that know the area, know devolution well, and certainly know a lot about the West Midlands Combined Authority, indeed my own city in Coventry. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about devolution and where we're at, because it lays down absolutely the context, politically, economically, socially, and guess what? Places are where people live their lives, and that's where things do get done, as complex, as exhilarating as that is. Then I'll talk a little bit about the strategy that I'm really proud of, actually, which has started from very humble beginnings, about how we might tackle some of this in a mainstream way to shift that dial that Jenny and all of us know needs to be shifted. And then thirdly, and maybe this will be, I don't know, you'll be the judge of it, whether it'll be controversial or not, I want to sort of spend the last few moments, kind of, I don't know if it's a rallying call, a call to arms, but it's tough at the moment. And Jenny finished that off. It's really tough for leaders, for colleagues, but it's also tough for communities. And I'll spend a little bit of time, the third bit, just talking about what that might look like and where we might want to go in terms of your partnership, your network, and your collaboration. So, first bit then, about the Combined Authority devolution. This isn't going to be a boring masterclass on devolution, where it came from, but it is going to be about scale, opportunity that's happening across England, certainly at the moment. And also, anyone that knows me, it'll be incredibly candid about the upsides and the downsides of where we've got to. For those that don't know what's happening across the devolved area of the West Midlands Combined Authority, this is moving on very quick. The map that you see there shows just the scale of what we're doing in this part of the country. From the Welsh borders, right the way across actually to the West Midlands conurbations and the three proud cities of Coventry, my own, Wolverhampton and Birmingham, right up to the border of this part of the world in the East Midlands and the great cities here, serving a population, and these are important figures, a population well in excess of 4 million people. In fact, it's getting close now to 4.5 million people. So this is a big game changer for geographically how we can think about devolution, collaboration, which is a word I've heard already in the first session, again from Jenny. And we need to unpack what that means about layering, scale, how we're working fundamentally differently now across our country. But I just wanted to share that in the sense of covering actually 4 local enterprise partnerships, dozens of local authorities, a number of partnerships in terms of CSPs, including some that are here today, which is fantastic, as well as thinking about best practice from outside of that area. But this is an opportunity to think at scale about some of these challenges, whilst never losing the profound issue, which won't be lost on any of you, which is that actually how people live their lives every single day is often right down to a micro, individual, family, community level. But nevertheless, this is what's in play. And I have to tell you, this takes a huge amount of credit to the bold, mature political leadership across the West Midlands, some of those areas. Because I'm telling you something for nothing. There's absolutely no doubt at all that people have given us a very little chance 2 years ago for me to be able to stand here as the chief exec of the largest combined authority in the country, covering that area when we didn't necessarily cover ourselves in glory in decades of the past about how we could work across borders, drop the old baggage and the history of the past and think about how you create a very progressive future for our people, which, by the way, is the only thing that really matters. Won't spend much time on this. This is when we originally did the deal. As you can probably tell, those that are very sharp and follow political history, there's been quite a lot of changes. The man in the centre row no longer is there. You'll see my previous leader, Anne Lucas, who was the only female leader in the West Midlands and the first female leader in Coventry, sandwiched, looking incredibly unhappy. She was unhappy because she was obviously, as a Labour politician, obviously had the Conservatives in front of her, surrounded by men in suits. But actually, she was inwardly very happy because that deal actually did suggest the largest infrastructure deal in this country at one time. And what that enabled us to do was think very, very carefully about some of the issues structurally and systemically that already have been outlined to you. It's not about the macho stuff about an £8 billion programme. I know that photo looks like it's a bit macho. It's not just about how much we've got in play with the cranes in the sky, diggers on the ground, how we're going to transform the economy, as important as that is. It's about an opportunity to say this is now a moment where we're going to take responsibility, control and accountability for delivering improved lives for our people. And yes, we have some potential funding to be able to do that differently. And yes, we have an elected mayor. Very, very clear right from the beginning. But to be able to have a devolution deal of that scale, that size, covering that kind of geography, with those levels of devolved responsibility, a direct elected mayor accountable across the electorate of the 7 metropolitan areas, including those 3 cities, will be part of the deal. And we're only a matter now of weeks away from our particular direct elected mayoral election, one of 6 up and down the country. And again, for those that are following this, incredibly important to understand the political landscape of this country and some of our greatest city regions will be transformed. And on 5th of May, when people wake up, there will be a fundamentally different way in which power is convened and brokered across large areas of our country. They're the facts. So within that, as we get to this last bit, when I've finished at the end about where next in this difficult but exhilarating context, this is a driver that you need to understand. And you'll be sitting there with different views about whether devolution is something that you want to get stuck into. Maybe not in a particularly devolved area. Maybe you feel as though with the change from chancellors, Theresa May's new government, there feels not so much of a forward push on devolution, combined authorities and mayors. But this is in play and covering a significant part of this country. So let's just talk then about what we've done around the economic strategy, because this is really important in terms of how we have laid out the plans for shifting what has been decades of underperformance across the West Midlands. And we want to say it's making our mark, to understand how we can lift the economic aspiration of our place. But a family of strategic economic plans, to respect the fact that for a number of years, so this is doing it, by the way, nothing to do with me, for a number of years our local enterprise partnerships had worked on their own individual plans, understanding their own areas and how they could deliver together, public, private, voluntary sector, people across areas to deliver greater opportunities for the economy. So to say, actually, in this new world of layering, and Jenny again used this word, this is really important. I talk about layer cakes, and it's about layering and understanding the complexity in which we're in now. You can, at the same time, be incredibly local and economically understand deeply and profoundly what makes your place tick. And at the same time be comfortable to work on a slightly bigger geography, to understand a sub-region. You can then completely comfortable in this new, mad, bad, exciting world be able to understand how you're part of a big, big city region and a devolved area like the West Midlands. And yes, you can then start thinking about post-Brexit, the power of how we as a nation can deliver an internationalisation, growth, prosperity and different future for our people. And this idea of leaders saying that those two things are mutually exclusive, incompatible and impossible, wake up and smell the reality of what the future looks like. It's the messiness, the complexity, the uncertainty of layering which is going to drive us forward. And it's the people that can navigate that and understand it which will actually make a greater future for all of us. We were determined to make sure our economic plan for the West Midlands Combined Authority against that major devolution deal was able to add value to that was already in play. Not lay some kind of horrendous overlay which was disrespecting that was already in play. And I think we've done that well. Some of you might have heard me say this before, and I want to focus on a couple of things. This is really important. Because as we became devolved and that large structure laid out the aspiration for a different future, respected that was already in play, we, for the first time ever, in my view, laid out something which was evidence-based, deep econometrics, understanding that we weren't just going to pluck bingo figures out of the air and hope in some kind of way of osmosis or miraculous delivery, we'd find a way of delivering it. We used the evidence, that's where it took us, but above all, we were aspirational. It's not good enough. The guilty knowledge of decades of underperformance economically with a part of the country should have been doing so much better. So look at a couple of those numbers. The idea to be able to think about creating an addition of over 500,000 net new jobs, about lifting productivity to make us more productive in a way which would actually stop the years and years of not being anywhere near the national productivity line. I could go on with the other ways in which we want to look at housing growth and capturing those very issues, which I think Jenny was talking about, the wider societal issues, layered up through the individual all the way up. I want to pick one thing because I think this is really, really important to you, to us, and about how we might actually disruptively, and I mean disruptively, innovate and transform going forward. And that's that figure that sits towards the bottom middle of the page. Just under 4 billion in our neck of the woods is the gap every year between that which we get in from Exchequer, from other sources, in terms of the public bodies, and that which we spend on our high-demand services. That's not only a 4 billion gap every year which is needing to be breached, otherwise that's a productive and a productivity anchor which is anchoring us down, which is a nightmare. This is a point, much, much more important than that. I know, you know, that 4 billion hides and masks far too many of our families. We know them now. Far too many of our families that are caught in a downward spiral of dependency on services and outcomes that are no good for them and can't continue in that way. So if you don't want to buy into the economics of it, buy into the radical social impacts of really crap lives that are being lived by far too many of our communities still, which is the pivot point which I will agree 100% with Jenny about. How can we possibly, and you'll see this as I'll just go through the second and third bit of what I want to share with you, how can we possibly expect some kind of top-down way of being able to transform people's physical activity potential when they're not at the top of their game for a raft of societal, economic, job-related reasons? Well, the answer is you can't. The analogy of being, feeling sick and not being able to make those decisions and move yourself forward. Let's get real, everybody, about the reality of still what is going on in our communities, not just across the West Midlands, but across the country. I don't want to spend much time on this, but we focused really clearly on those areas that we knew would grow the economy fastest. Think about how those various sectors, and you can see them on the screen, would link together, but not in some kind of naive way that you build an economy, you chuck money at it, you go for the sectors for growth, you trickle down, and before you know it, those very cohorts, those very individuals, those very families that mean most to us and are so out with all the previous upsides that we have, miraculously find these better lives for themselves. And they're more active, and they're more vibrant, and they're less mentally ill. That doesn't work. But what we are saying is you can get the headroom and make it a more inclusive growth agenda where you can really understand this time it's going to be designed with those unusual suspects, not the ones that have dived in before and felt very much done to. That's our aspiration, but we do go where the evidence is, which is where we believe we can differentiate ourselves. And that point about the 4 billion, absolutely essential. And you might still be thinking, what has this got to do with a convention and an annual get-together of these partnerships and the work that I do? Because this is everything. I've been really outspoken about this, and I'll be outspoken again. We have had decades in this country, decades, prior to the crash of significant capital and revenue investment into our places. Fact. We've had initiative after initiative to be able to think about how people live their lives and to improve those kind of opportunities for so many more than had the chance in the past. And guess what? As I stand in front of you, as Jenny speaks, as we gather here, those disparities, those inequalities are as deep and as wide they've always been. So we've got a broken system. Now, the fact that the funding has fallen out, in my view, creates a situation whereby we can be radical, transformational, navigate that grey area, deal with the uncertainty and the ambiguity and drive forward as leaders in fundamentally different ways. Even if the money worsened the system, I'd be arguing for a radical transformation and reform of public services because it does not deliver the outcomes we need for our people. It is broken in far too many parts. So now is an opportunity, a crossroads, often talked about, where we need to grab this, and that's where I'll end the presentation. So then just, if done a bit about the combined authority, the big macroeconomic, right down to individual areas where we're going to go after our economic futures, reform public services at scale, reduce that 4 billion gap so we can create the outcomes that we all want for our people. Why a strategy on physical activity? Why determination? I happen to be one individual that is an advocate and a champion and powerfully believe the opportunities that present themselves through thinking about moving away from sedentary lifestyles to physical active lifestyles. Coventry on the Move, a really powerful city-based way of mobilising communities, going to where they are, not where we arrogantly as policymakers, politicians, professionals would like them to be or expect them to be, and through assets, through mobilising people, shifting those participation rates in a way that Coventry never thought possible. And quite frankly, in a way that cost, in terms of decision makers and funders, a damn sight less than years and years of investment in many other strategies. So I believe in it. I believe in mobilisation. I believe that you can shift whole-scale change transformationally, and you can target those interventions at those that we really need to work with, not at. So the idea of thinking about the West Midlands and this amazing population, this diverse, incredible place, to think about how we could learn some of those lessons and the way in which the CSPs from across our area, our directors of public health, physical activity colleagues, different people from fundamentally different areas of our business, transport, housing, all coming together to try and think about what a strategy could look like. And how could that possibly work at a time when we're trying to move to another devolution deal? Think about the mayoral election. Think about how you're going to de-risk an £8 billion programme. This is the heart of what we're doing. This is not the periphery. That's my only point. Take everything else away. Forget anything else I've said. This can't be something which sits as some kind of nice-to-have strategy. This is core to the business of how you revitalise economies, people's lives. And unless we start thinking it as that, then I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble in terms of a devolved body. That requires a lot of work. It's attritional. It's taking hearts and minds. It's the kind of things which I know you will spend most of your working lives thinking about how you can do that in a much more systemic way. And of course, if you read it, and please engage with it as it goes through the final stages, and I expect the elected mayor, whoever he or she is, whichever colour of administration they are, already conversations I have with every single one of those mayoral candidates is a major part of campaigning and core activity when they become mayor is driving this strategy through. So watch this space. There will be a huge amount of expectation on what this is going to do to shift some of those dials that we've already talked about. And of course, when you read it, you won't see significant chapters, insights around sport per se, about sport strategies, about the bricks and mortars of what we're about. You will see exactly those levers that are going to make the difference and shift those really dogged areas of participation and physical activity around the housing, transport, environment, physical, mental health and well-being. And quite right, because if, again, you don't buy into that holistic systems leadership, guess what? The very funders, the very devolved nature in which we're now working will mean that is where the capital, the revenue, the collaboration will go towards. That's the game we're in, and I'm excited about this potential. Jenny's already put the slide up, and this shows where we are across that West Midlands Combined Authority. So I'm going to talk more about that, other than to say the following. I've been really impressed, not because Jenny's in my eye line, I was impressed a number of years ago when a number of organisations across sectors, with some of the cuts and some of the challenges, disinvested completely or partially in insight, in evidence-based policy and planning. Here we saw Sport England, thankfully Public Health England, a number of others investing in insight, evidence, because that drives the kind of practice that we need for the future. One of the things I really wanted just to highlight here, apart from the challenges that we still have on this and where we need to really focus, Jenny could not have been clearer, I can't be clearer, it's that level of inactivity that we're going after, is as powerful as insight is, as powerful as understanding the macro environment so we can really shift this stuff. Ultimately, inside those categories, inside those statistics, are just far too many of our individuals that we eyeball every single day. There's far from the kind of lifestyle outcomes and opportunities that we would wish for our own family, and they sit out with. It's unacceptable. And unless we can find a way to use all these contexts, levers that we have got in play, to challenge and change that and speak truth to power from platforms like this, I'm afraid we're going to have the platitudes and the backslapping of the past where, isn't it great that we've moved some of these things on incrementally? No, it's not. Here's a moment in time where we have to regalvanise, recalibrate and think about how we can disrupt and shift an entire system. Because I'm telling you now, if we don't, that will not move. So it's people, it's individuals, it's people that we care about in our places that sit behind those numbers. That's why it should drive us to action. That's why it's unacceptable. This might be too small for some of you to see. I hope the presentations will go out. But these are just a sense of, if there is a massive challenge, and we know there is, that previous chart has made it clear, if we can use our physical activity strategy, think about West Midlands on the move, think about asset mobilisation, all of those areas of delivery in a fundamentally more systems-based way, there are major, major opportunities and potential for us, not just in terms of improving people's lives, but across every area around investment potential, job growth, thinking about reducing some of the really big challenges that the West Midlands and many places has around mental health and getting people back into productive life, back into the workplace, giving them the chance with themselves, their families, their friends, people around them, to be able to be at the top of their game or much nearer to the top of their game so they can make those active choices for themselves and others. And yes, the financial impacts, which we heard in the session earlier on, are there for us to go after at a time of continued austerity. So this we must keep coming back to. There is a potential to really make something different happen. And this is a CSP environment. So thinking about the way in which I guess I was very lucky on my particular patch to think about those that came together to say we don't know where this will end. We'll start somewhere. We'll follow it everywhere. We'll get a nature of the fact that we've got a common shared agenda. So proud to see that kind of engagement and collaboration, but also, to be really honest, and it's a phrase I've used all the time since I've been involved, certainly as Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, is it's febrile, it's frenzied. Everyone wants a piece of us. For many ways, devolution Combined Authority is this new kind of poster boy and poster girl was something that everyone wanted to attach themselves to. And if I'm really honest, some out of interest, some out of probably a more understandable but ultimately vulgar anticipation that it would lead to significant investment opportunities that weren't available elsewhere. But for whatever the reason, what I would say is there is something going on across England and certainly in devolved areas, which means for CSPs, you think about that future laid out, as uncertain as it might be, how you can think about two things at the same time. Be focused, be clear about what you offer, your relationship with Sport England nationally. Is that going to follow a kind of devolved nature of then how you deal with the things that really matter in our places with our people and our communities? But at the same time, whilst you're reflecting on that focus, where the evidence takes you, also grab those opportunities. This is brilliant stuff about authenticity and about momentum. We've got to find a way, because this is so tough at the moment, to see progress, to see ourselves moving forward. How ironic it would be in the whole sense of making people and wanting people to be more physically active and less sedentary, that we find our own approaches caught a little bit in some kind of bureaucracy and organisational inertia. We need to keep moving. We need to keep active. We need to keep moving on knocking those boundaries down, but do it in a focused way and do not collaborate for the sake of it. And look at some of those other areas. Strengthen those relationships, yes, but say no. Say that is not an area which I believe I've got a strength to collaborate in. I'm kind of over it as a chief executive of continuing to hear the need for collaboration's sake. The best collaborations are those that are clear about their bottom line, understand what they bring to the party, are clear about the outcomes they're trying to achieve, as well as saying, do you know what? We can't add that value there. You need to search out, and we'll help you search out different collaborators, different partners. That's the trademark, the kind of hallmark almost for the future of collaboration and partnerships. But think about that depth of place. Again, name-checking Jenny again, but this is the truth. I need people across the West Midlands Combined Authority, in my own city, to think about not just their areas of expertise and the networks that they've been involved in, but understand the deep, deep and profound issues about what makes our localities tick and what makes our people understand how they want to live their lives every single day. That's what's going to set people apart. They're the collaborations which I seek out. So I think there's something in there about how you can find and formalise those arrangements, but also do it in an evidenced, honest way about what you can and can't bring to the party. I'm probably over time, so I'm going to finish with saying, in terms of champions, advocates, you do need to find them out. Let me tell you that what I'm finding increasingly is in this tough environment we all find ourselves in, as exhilarating as it also can be, you're finding people going hiding. You're seeing people put their heads up above the parapet, that's great too. Lock in to your advocates, your champions. Some of them might be at organisational powerful levels. Many will be locked into our communities. Heard about the anaesthetists. The truth is, no one can sort out the the damaging sets of structural relationships that are in play at the moment about health and social care. No one's bright enough to sort that out at a big level. You start engaging with community activists, clinicians, GPs who care about these agendas and others, you then start to see things shifted. So please find out those champions. And these are the ways in which I think we can scale up. We can look across not just those traditional areas of what having a more physically active community and population will do for us, but we can think about how we can influence policy that's emerging, not just in devolved areas, but outside. I've overrun, but let me just say one final thing. So if I've covered off the combined authority, devolution, our economic plan, where we're going with the physical activity strategy, core, not peripheral, to what we want to do as a really large devolved area in England. Let me just finish with, I don't think it's controversial, I think it's been led already. This is not a time going forward in terms of from the Arab Spring through to Brexit, through to what's happened across the Atlantic, for kind of weak leadership. It's definitely a time for evidence. It's definitely a time for understanding impact. But above all, it's about disruption. It's about transformation. It's about being innovative. And it's not about shifting the needle in a minor incremental way any longer. I think this is possible. I sense that there is something which is not, if you like, because of the circumstances or despite the circumstances that we face. It's almost a result of the very social, political, economic environment, the funding challenges that we're all facing, the perpetual change to what's happening around us. And the notion that I talk about quite a lot, which is our communities, our politicians, our policy makers, all of us are caught in this kind of pinball machine, trying to make sense of what all this will mean, what it means for us, what it means for people around us. That environment is not going to change. I genuinely believe that as you come forward again in 6 months, 9 months, think about the changes that are happening, you will see more shift, more challenges, but also some real, I think, once-in-a-generation opportunity to do something so different to what we've done before, which is stop working in boxes, work across boundaries, across geographies, lock in the centre of this country, nationally, with locally, with regional structures, whatever in play, to deliver something on a much more systems basis, rather than the professional boxes and the silos that has quite frankly dogged a lot of our public policy and our delivery for far too many decades. And I don't think this will be for everyone. My final comment is this will leave people on the sidelines, because this is the toughest leadership challenge that we've ever faced. I sense we're at the tipping point though, and people in this room, in terms of the agendas you care about, can actually start to move us to a collaborative systems approach, which will actually lead people to more active, fulfilling lives, which is good for them and good for us. But above all, it'll put a new kind of leadership into this country, which is about understanding that places work as complete systems. And I think you should charge yourselves, irrespective, or maybe because of the changes you'll continue to see as networks, to be front and centre of that and stop looking about others who might be able to pick that mantle up. It's for you to shape. And I think that's an active choice that you need to make. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Martin.